So I'm getting ready to upgrade this guitar. The only upgrade that's been done is the roller string trees, roller trees. So I'm going to put a new bridge on it and a new neck. And the neck I'm getting looks like a Fender neck. It's just made to look like a Fender neck. And it'll be the first one of those kind of fake Fender necks I've ever gotten. And this neck's good. It's okay, but I noticed that it got kind of dirty when I did the fretwork on it. Some of the dust and stuff from the work got down in the grains, and I've never really seen it permeate a neck as much as this one. So it's dirty. So I'm going to clean it up, and I'm going to put a new nut on it. I think I cut the nut a little too low on one of the strings, but it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. Actually, my cheaper original Strat copy from Glarry was way, way, way better. It's one of my favorite guitars, but I think this one with a better bridge is just going to be great. So I got this new bridge. This is a Wilkinson. You can kind of see the Wilkinson branding. There it is. Let's turn like this. See the Wilkinson branding on there, and it's got a really fat block. This really helps with sustain. I like the bent steel saddles. Some people think these are bad. I love them. It's got the black hardware, which I think is cute. And it came with extra black riser pin things. I guess in case you wear these out, you can swap those out. Came with a Music Lily pick, which is where I got it from, was Music Lily. It is a push-pull whammy bar there for the tremolo, wiggle stick, whatever you want to call it. I like calling them whammy bars. Some people call them trem bars because they snap into the tremolo. So you got this kind of plastic piece here, and then this just plugs right in there, and then you've got a place to tighten right here with your hex wrench. And they don't rattle. This won't rattle like a screw-in trem bar. Alright, so this is going to be part of a little series I'm doing, working on guitars, called In Bed with Guitars. I'm actually sitting on my bed, which is where I do the work on my guitars. I use an old white t-shirt to sit on the bed. I have all my tools over here, off to the side. In this area back here, I got my toolbox and stuff. So I called these roller saddles earlier. I called them the correct term later though, but they're string trees. These are roller trees. They're like some of the newer Fender ones, where they create less friction on the edges of the strings, and I like them. I like them better. So I'm gonna go ahead and take. There's nothing wrong with using strings until you're done with them. Of course, if they get dead, I wouldn't keep using them. Okay, so that's all those strings ready to go there. So I'm going to take this little pin my daughter got me. She said she thought it was just a nice pin. She didn't even know. This pin has is that some sale at her school? It has a level, inches, centimeters to millimeters. Of course, it's a pen. It's a working pen, and a clip. And then this comes off. This is a stylus. So I guess I could use that if I don't use tablets or smartphones or anything like that. And it's a screwdriver. So this has a little Phillips head, and it's magnetized inside here. You can put the cap back on like that. And this is cheap. It's not like a high end or whatever, but it's just very easy for this kind of work. It's super, and I've got a pen if I need it. I've got a level. It's a small level, I guess, if I need it. So it helps to have little things like that. The multi-use. I heard a guy say that I have a lot of respect for, Jesse Bond, who does Bithead videos, Bithead 1000. Super, super funny. He doesn't like to be laughed at, I guess, because he's talking about his life, but he really just could be a comedian on just on how funny he is, his videos are. But he said, if you ever see a worker come to your house and pop out one of these, just kick them right out of your house. And I can't agree with that, because I've actually was given this by my wife's father, over 20 years ago, and I've used it constantly. I use this Leatherman PST II. I use it constantly for so many things. Like, it balances like that, so you can set something up on this. It has all this, like, super sharp knife. I just used this today to open packages because it's like a surgical sharpness knife. It has scissors. I guess, they would be for cutting leather, maybe. But these are really sharp, good scissors. A couple other things. I broke the punch off of it a long time ago, this puncher, but it's still kind of some of it on there. But the very tip of it broke off. It's got a screwdriver, it's got a bottle opener. Then it's actually got this file here. And I use this file. It's a fine edge, might be like diamond or something. It's a super, super fine edge. I use this for the edges of frets. So if you have a fret sprout, a little hanging sharp little frets, and it's because the bottom of it is, see if I can get this on here right, the bottom of this is totally flat. So when you set this on the neck of a guitar, you know that this isn't going to cut anything at all. Only this part right here is going to make contact with anything. So I know if I get this down on the edge, first off it's angled, so I have that control. And if I push it onto the very edge of the fret, I have a lot of control over it. I can even bend it into the handle and have more control. I've used this to round and soften the ends of frets many times, and this is extremely good for that first work, and that's a lot of times, that's the only thing that your guitar is going to need. You'll get it, and it's going to need something. It's going to need the very edges of the little sharp parts of the frets because of whatever. Either it was the factory, not enough work put into it, or the temperature, or a little bit of both. You'll get fret sprout, or you'll get little hanging sharp frets, and that shouldn't make you not want to deal with the guitar, because it's going to happen. My advice, and I haven't really heard anybody say this, but I can tell you I've worked on about a little over 30 guitars now. I'm not, the most experienced guy at this, but I've also learned from many different luthiers, having frequented YouTube and all kinds of different channels, and I've heard so many different things. I've essentially, graduated from the, Guitar Work School of YouTube, surfing all these different YouTube videos and figuring out how to do things, to the point where I can give advice, and I'm very confident that the advice is good. And one piece of advice I can give somebody on working on guitars is, if you're going to work on your frets, do it in dry, cold climates, and when it's wintertime, or in a cool, dry area, because that's when your neck wood is going to shrink up. And so when your neck has shrunk because it's cool and dry, and it's wintertime, or whatever, maybe a controlled environment, then your frets are going to pop out on the edges. They're going to have little sharp ends that pop out. If you do your fretwork then, when it's cool and dry, then later on when it's warm and humid and your neck soaks up water and expands, your frets will still be in there okay. And then later on when it gets cool and dry again, your frets won't pop out any further. So, if you do all your neck work in the summertime when it's humid, when the wintertime comes along, don't be surprised if your frets are sharp on the ends again, or if you get fret sprout, you need to hit it with a hammer or whatever you do to deal with your frets. All right, I went ahead and got the screws out. And look, I used my Leatherman again to set this up for soldering later. So I went ahead and used it to strip the end of this wire. And that's, I'm sure that's totally fine to use a Leatherman for that. Anyway. So I've got my bridge here. Now, I always make my bridges float a little above. But you have to make sure these are nice and loose to be able to do that, because if they're clamped down too much, you won't get that effect. And what it does is gives you up and down note instead of just down, which is what most. If your bridge is flat against the body, then the only action that you're going to be able to get is to lower notes using your trem bar. Nothing. This top bar, it's bent. It doesn't look so horrible, but this is the part that's just gonna, excuse me, this is the part that's, these actually break sometimes. This one isn't, obviously. And it's a screw in. Your bar's gonna screw in there. And I had this action nice and high, which means this neck's probably been shimmed. We'll see. It might be that I need to take some of this back just a hair so that there's room for this to move slightly into this area. There's room under it on this top ply where that would be okay. So yeah, just playing around right now just to get an idea of what the next step is. So I'm actually going to take some of this paint spillover off the inside of this. It's got quite a bit of paint spillover, and I'm using the thicker file that came with the Leatherman GST II. Sorry, StuMac, I didn't buy a $500 file for this, but yeah, I do have nice files for nut work. I have nice files for fret work. I don't have $300 StuMac files for work. I don't have anything like that. I'm sure their tools are great, but their tools are extremely expensive. And I'm sure they make a lot of stuff, though they also have really cool things that you kind of can only really get from them. But I actually found a place here in America that makes some of the parts I use. This was made in the USA, and it's the best lightweight steel fret checker, and it's, you know, way cheaper than StuMac, but way better than any of the freebie crappy Chinese ones that aren't very good. They really aren't very good either. They will not check the neck properly when you're going down here to check for, you know, rattle or whatever. As you can see, there's none on this because it's been done. But and the same company I got that from, I got my neck checker. This is made in America. This was not StuMac prices, but this is really great for checking your relief in both scales, in the common Fender scale and the Gibson scale, which the Fender is your 25.5 and Gibson is 24 3/4, a shorter neck scale. So you can use this for either one of those guitars. And this was not expensive, but it was made in the USA, and it's an extremely good tool. So they do have them. You just have to kind of dig around for them and try to find them. If you don't, a lot of times, like you buy a kit, maybe you see a couple things that might work from a cheap Chinese kit, and then it will have one of those fret rockers as a throw-in. And those things, I don't know what's with them, but I can show you side by side a fret rocker that is made in America that's actually really good and inexpensive, and I'll show you where it will detect a rocking motion on your frets better than a Chinese one, which you might not even be able to use. So when they glazed this over with paint, they probably dipped it in paint really quick. They probably just dumped it in paint and then hung it on some coat hangers or something. and then they let it dry for however long, and the dripping of the paint and everything just kind of blobbed up and globbed up everywhere. And these things are pooped out of a factory at light speed, and very few hands were on them. A lot of machining, and sometimes you'll get a really, really good instrument from those kind of conditions, and sometimes you won't. So because it's hit or miss, and because you really don't know what you're going to get ready to work on them. And people say, oh, well, I want to begin, so I'm going to get a Glarry, because it's a good beginner guitar, but it's really not. Those are good for modding. They're good for people who know what they're doing. They're good if you plan on working on guitars, and maybe you want to start learning to work on a guitar. I don't know, maybe guitar techs and luthiers and stuff really like Glarrys because they bring in more people with these $100 and $150 guitars, and then they're going to pay another $150, $200, or $300 to get the thing where they can really use it. Okay, so I went and put the old claw back in there, but I used the larger, newer, better quality screws. I have one spring in here, and I'm getting ready to use, oh no, my leather bit to put that in there. I'm going to drop that into this hole. I'm going to grab this, put that right on like that. How about that? Happy little spring. Okay, now that's two. And what I might end up needing to do, oh, that feels really hard as it is. That's fine. In fact, I'll probably have to loosen these when it's done, because I can just feel that's taking a lot just to move that. So these are great. That's really strong. I need to resolder this, even though that's didn't really need to happen. But that's fine. Go ahead and peel that off there a little bit. So this will be resoldered, and then we'll do the plate. And then next will be the neck, restring, intonate, and hopefully it'll be good. Alright, we're about to take this off, and we'll just kind of reveal what's going on in this. And this is supposed to be better than the entry-level Glarry Strat copy. I'm going to go ahead and pull up here. It looks like, of course, really short, small wiring, so it's hard to see what's going on underneath here. Have to, let me see. Yeah, I can't, okay, yeah, okay, I can pull it a little bit of leeway there. And we'll pull up on this, and we can flip it over. And now we're looking in here, and honestly, this wire is not bad. This is actually a braided kind of cloth wire, and so's the orange and the blue and the black. They're all kind of thicker. Now this is a cheap switch. Everyone's going to say, oh, that's a terrible cheap switch. Now my son Nick is here.
Hello.
So I'm going to ask him a question. Quick, do these look like nickels or dimes?
Dimes.
Okay, so Nick knows these are dime pots. These are not nickel pots. We know these are cheap Chinese dime pots. They're not like sought after, super high quality 500K pots. They're probably 250K and they're cheap Chinese nickel or dime pots, and they're okay. They've each got a capacitor, a little green capacitor on them, and it looks like, believe it or not, some shielding tape right here, which I just realized this is shielded. So honestly, I don't know, most of the Chinese guitars that are really, really cheap, I don't know if they actually shield their stuff. I don't know if they spend the time to shield their stuff. So 2 points of interest for quality on this instrument that are immediately noticeable is that the wires are actually kind of thick and they have a braided kind of look and feel to them. These, of course, they're not like that really thick fabric braided stuff like on Gibsons and stuff like that, but these are actually higher quality wire than a lot of the cheaper guitars that I've seen have. That's very, very good. That immediately stands out as being better, at least a kind of a step better than the entry level super crappy stuff. And like I said, this is the GST II model. It's supposed to be an upgrade on the GST, which is their Strat copy. There's a lot of stuff in here, and it's also, like a lot of these Glarrys and a whole lot of guitars nowadays that you get, no matter where they're from, it is set up for HSH right away. So this is for a humbucker if you want, single coil and another humbucker. So you can do super Strat setup, HSH or HSS, or I guess if you're loony, SSH, like I've seen on a couple of them out there. It's not absolutely reprehensibly terrible. It's actually somewhat acceptable on the inside of this guitar. It definitely needed cleaned up. It had nasty dust and dirty stuff from factory kind of nastiness in there. So yeah, we've seen the inside of it, and these are branded Wilkinsons, but they, are not. Well, okay, I'll just say Wilkinson did a video recently about building one of his guitar kits that you can purchase from Stu Mac. And those come with Wilkinson pickups, and those pickups that it comes with are extremely high quality, somewhat expensive pickups. These are not those. These are staggered pole, probably the equivalent of an Alnico 5 or something like that, and then they are branded Wilkinson. It's a little feely kind of dipped down tactile lettering, but they are okay. These are pretty good pickups. I like them. So that's where I'm at with those. I would recommend being less picky about pickups and be more picky about the sound you're getting from your amp and the amp you're using and stuff before you start like criticizing every little tiny detail of everything. Alright, so we've got the new neck here, and I'm comparing it to the old neck. So we can see the nut's already been filed, and it looks like a pretty good job. It looks like it might match up. I went ahead and checked it out with my ruler. This is, as I'm looking, this is extremely flat all the way through. Maybe it's there. Yeah, it's flat. So this neck is flat. I felt the fret edges. There's a teensy tiny bit of fret edges, especially as you get to the top. I'm going to deal with that before this goes on the body. I've test fitted it to the body, and it is a tighter fit than this original neck. So when this goes in, it's going to be a tighter fit, and that's better. That's usually better to have that. Of course, you don't have any looseness or sway. It also, even though they are the same thickness here, I think that the radius on this newer neck is slightly rounder, as it probably should be if it's going to be like that classic Fender radius, which will put the frets possibly slightly higher. Okay, now this is not a Fender neck, but it does have this kind of, and when I bought this, it had a disclaimer within it saying that, you know, that whatever courts have already said that this headstock is shown so much that it's not owned, I guess. But I'm not trying to say, oh, this is Fender. It's not. This is a blank kind of neck set up to look like that original Fender music note, which that's what I'm pretty sure that is a music note. Is what this is supposed to look like. Get that neck out a little bit, only the other side of it. I'm going to use this file, and it's really close together, fuzzy kind of grain. It's not wide like this guy that could like saw through wood, and I'm not going to be using the grating edge, the sawing kind of grating edge of this thicker one. I'm going to be using the soft, flat, non-abrasive edge that complements this softer one to go down each of these and just get rid of any kind of little sharpness. So I feel the sharpness here on the end, and then I'm just going to go right in there. And sometimes you might want to just go in one direction only, like that. And you can also use this to lightly round the edges of your neck if you like that, which I do. I like, of course, it's comfortable. If you're playing a guitar and the edges are not, the edges of the neck are really flat and kind of sharp, that's uncomfortable. And so a neck that comes with a more rounded edge, which this one kind of does actually, it's just the slightest bit rounded, but I can go over everything here in this edge and just kind of add just a little more roundness to soften it up, to take the bite out of it. And then all the way down the neck, that's going to be a really nice, comfortable neck. Okay, so got me slightly interrupted there. But so as I check these, I'm going to make sure there's none of the hanging nub part where the fret was first smushed down into the neck. You'll get this metal where the metal has been, sometimes there's filler there, and the very edge of the top of the metal has decided to poke out a tiny bit. I got to make sure to get rid of that. And then the sharp edges of the flat part of the fret that go onto the top of the neck can hang over, and of course I have to make sure to get rid of that. Alright, as I'm almost done reaching up the edge of this, I want to point out that even if I'm not feeling any sharp hanging frets here, I'm going to round the corner edges of the fret and kind of add that uniformity as I'm moving up the neck. So all of this side is done, and I've went in and rounded every edge of every fret. When I go in to hit it with that file, or I mean with the sanding sponge, it's going to really soften all of these little kind of angles that have happened as I've rounded off each of these. So when I round them off, I'm really going kind of at a controlled grade where I'm starting against the very edge of the sharp part, sanding, and then moving along to add a rounded little edge. And I'm doing that again regardless of whether the fret is actually hanging out and kind of stabbing or not. So by feel, as I'm going down this, there's no hang now. There's no hanging, there's no sharp stuff, nothing. And each of the edge of these is rounded so that when I take the sponge to it, this is the sponge I use. You can see it's been used here. It got snagged into some stuff here a little, but it's been used a lot. But this is it's a sanding sponge. Doesn't really run out very much. These are great. I recommend them. They're just really great for work. I use a brush to get off most of any kind of little bits before moving on to the next step. This is the cheaper file. I might start with this and then move over to my Hosco. The Hosco is the higher quality Japanese made fret, and I have those sitting there waiting in case I need to use them. This is the Hosco. And these are good, very good, and they are really not. And Hosco also makes, and they're not StewMac, they're not super expensive. Hosco also makes a handleless fret file that I'd like to get. I think they look good. They're a good idea because when you're filing frets, part of the problem of it is that you are doing this kind of scoopy motion like this, and so your arm wants to push down and then level out, and that can kind of affect the wood. It can affect the frets. It can, your own human motion of trying to create that sawing effect there is going to cause problems. So they have one where it's got the feeling part on the edge of the file itself, and it has no handle. And then it has like these, one on each side, one for a thicker, deeper fret, one for a more shallow, thinner fret. But they're all sized for the 6 or so different sizes that you might encounter. Here are the other ones for the varying grades, and you'll want to match up the grade. If you try to do this work and it's too wide, the edges are going to drill into the side. They're going to be grating kind of little ridges in the pathway. But if you use the right size and you're not too rough with it, then it's not going to affect the wood at all. See, now I've got my sponge, and I'm just going to go right over this work I just did. And this is immediately going to like round the edges of the frets perfectly. It's going to soften them up where I've done that work, and it's just going to round them up perfectly. I can already feel all the way up the neck. No hanging frets, no sharp edges, no anything. then as I look in, anywhere where I have begun to round the edges to get rid of any of that has softened up considerably. So as I go over it, it's going to just kind of perfect that. I feel like the top edge of the neck usually needs just a little more attention because the frets are closer together and they want to get sharper. So I'm going to use my brush, get rid of any kind of stuff here, and then just kind of take a look at this, and maybe you can see as that's been softened up there. I don't know if you can really tell, but that's gotten softer, less jagged all the way down the neck as I've done that. Yep, I can feel all the way up the neck, there's nothing really snaggy. Okay. Okay, as I've used my rocker again to go over it, I've put some purple markings. They might be kind of hard to see, but I've marked the places on here where I'm getting some wobblings. So these are the marked high frets. And this is a file that's just as good for frets as if you use one of these. And as you can see, you can have a real fun time trying to get the tape off these to put new tape on. And you can get a really unlevel surface if you just put tape over old tape, which I wouldn't recommend doing that. So this is just the most fun, sarcasm intended, to try to deal with. Because first off, the paper sucks. So when you use this, you're going to get blank spots in the paper really fast. And so it's not going to be doing its work. You can put different grades and grits on it and stuff. That's wonderful. You could have whatever, 320, 220, whatever, 600, and even 1,000, and then just run through every grit as you're going over it. You could do that. That's true. You could also use a radius, which a lot of people are going to do. That's cute, you know. But I've never seen anyone say, "Hey, try one of these." But it's exactly the same thing. It is because it's longer than any grouping of frets. As you go over the fret, you're going to still be removing that material. So if I just start going over this fret here, I'm not pushing this with lots of force. I'm not pushing this with force. I'm just going and sliding it back and forth over these frets. And this is actually a pretty strong. You're not going to be wrapping this thing in paper. It's not going to run out of grit probably ever in the life of the product. And I've already removed much of the top of that. And if I check it now with my rocker, that's done. Okay? So as fast as I just did that, this is done. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just do this really quick over this whole entire thing. Of course, next I'm going to take this chopper to it, and I'm going to mark every top of every fret with this guy. So, and when you do this, you don't want to have your right hand and then start here on this side. Why? Because as you're putting the marks on and going this way, you're setting your hand in your pen. So you want to start on the left side if you're using your right hand on the furthermost fret, and then give it a line. Then the next fret, give it a line, and notice how I'm moving away. It's the guitar work equivalent of painting yourself into a corner. You don't want to do that. So you're going to start on the furthest most fret, then add your marker ink, and then move away from that point. Alright, I want to show now there's that line you achieve, as you can see here in the color. Once you've put a crown back on it, the little lines start to appear kind of on the center of each of the frets. Okay. And so after that, I'm going to use my sponge sander again, this time the thicker, kind of drier side here. I'm going to go over the entire thing. On there. So I'm going to use this and go over every fret. Right. So next step, I put this on the body to decide where the holes are going to go. Break out my drill and put this on. So to set these tuning machines up, I'm putting them on, tightening down the little nut part that guides along the edge of the tuning machine pole here, and then tighten them just enough to where you have a tiny bit of give on each of them, and before you decide exactly where you're going to go ahead and mark for your drilling. So next, I'm going to carefully flip this over, make sure it's still seated where I want it to be. I think I'm going to chop the strings a little. And I'm not taking them off. So I got the strings almost lined up perfectly. Not getting enough bridge rised up for what I'm wanting though, so I'm going to have to loosen the springs a little, but I do like the height. I had to do a lot of work on the saddles to lower them down, but they sound really good. It's got a good sound to it. A little bit of a little too close here and there. I still need to fine tune some things. But yeah, she's almost done. I got a Impossible Whopper. Put some vegan cheese on it, vegan mayo. Heated it up, heated the bottom half up a little bit in the microwave with the cheese. And some fries and salty fries. My oldest son and my oldest daughter just came back, and they had got this for me because I haven't eaten yet today. Just a little bit of chips this morning. And he got me a Coke. So yeah. So I'm going to eat this. Do a little bit more fine tuning. Then we'll do a whole look over the entire thing. And then I'm going to plug in the amp and make it make noise. Alright, so I've done the nut. I've went ahead and filed it. As I said, it seemed to be ready for 10s. The 13 seemed to fit okay, and the 17 did, but I went ahead and hit the 23, or the 26, the 36, and the 46 to bring the nut down to where it needs to be. I've got everything leveled out, the strings are good. I did have to address a couple more frets, and I think I'm going to have to address one more fret, and then the fret in the pocket, which I think is kind of getting in the way of the adjacent fretting area here on the fretboard. So the bottom three are fine, but then when I get up here, it's blocking out just a hair. Okay, so these top three get blocked out. I've also noticed that I'm getting a lot lower as I fine tune everything, because I've got the action really low now. And I went ahead and made the neck as straight as I could to just see. I've been through several different settings with the relief to try to make sure I know exactly where I want it to end up being. And so I think I might go ahead and shim this neck because of how low all of these saddles are ended up getting. And the problem is, though, with shimming it, is with the high E, excuse me, with the high E, it's not exactly low as far as the posts go. So the posts are actually going to be raising that up if the shim is on. But every other saddle has went down enough, I think. And you know, the way I think about it is once you add that shim and the neck is tilted back a little bit, then the natural relief from the neck is going to agree more with the saddles as they're raised up. All right. Really got good sound. I like it. Shimmed it, filed the nut, checked it around a little more to widen it. I went ahead and put some graphite, just some pencil on it, which I probably won't do too much more because I really don't like the residue it leaves behind. I'd like to use something else. I don't want to use anything called lizard spit or monkey sweat or whatever nastiness they call their string lubrication nowadays, but I'm sure there's something out there. I thought of using maybe silicone lubricant, or using some type of, maybe, I don't know, maybe like Hopsate gun oil or something that might work well. But yeah, it's got a really nice ring to it. I don't know how well you can hear it over there. Now these are those, like I said, the Wilkinson pickups, Wilkinson bridge. Brand new fake fender neck. This is not a real one. I don't think it is anyway. I don't think they would make any without that wooden core around the truss rod. Now I worked on the frets 3 times in total to try to eliminate any and all buzzing. So kind of a checklist of all the stuff that I had to go through to set this thing up. First off, I had to cut off parts of the hole for the bridge to fit down into. Okay, that sucked. But then when I got the bridge in, that was nice. And I went ahead and cut out some more of the nasty paint left over from the inside and from around it and stuff. Checked out the inside and the workings of it, saw that it had dime pots but really good looking wiring, and that the pickups looked pretty good. So then I got the neck. The neck needed a lot of work. I mean, it came almost perfectly flat, which is probably a good sign. Went ahead and gave it the edge treatment. Got all the little sharp anythings and rounded every edge of every fret. Did a level crown polish on the frets, and then I set up the string trees, the tuning machines, then the string trees. Then I set up the neck. I actually attached the neck, and then set up the guitar. When I set up the guitar, I found out that the saddles were a little bit too low, so I went ahead and took off the neck and did a couple more fret jobs just in certain spots, and then checked everything over and over again. And there are a couple of things about the guitar that are still kind of like up here on some of the higher frets. I'm not liking how good the contact is, but it's really up in these lower notes up on the high stuff that I probably will never use. But I'm going to probably work on that anyway. I'm going to go in and do a probably a 5 fret little grind down and get all these nice and low and even, so that they never disturb the frets leading up to them and they don't disturb each other. And now on the lower part we're getting good contact. Until you start getting into the thicker strings, then it starts to not be such great contact. So, but that's good. It's just about here, like it was before. I noticed when I added relief, it helped. So what that's telling me is that even though all this was flat and the rocker was telling me everything was good, that once it's in the pocket and the strings are lined up, then this still isn't exactly perfect right here. So like I said, I'm going to go in and fix that. For now though, it's all good and it's playing very, very well. As you can hear, it sounds like it's got a really good sound. So I can... So if I run through each of the settings, I'll go and start on the neck. One notch up, so it's combining these two guys. Now, of course, the combined middle and bridge pickup aren't really bad, but it's quieter. And if I was going to choose between the ability to combine 2 single coils towards the bridge, I'd just pick a humbucker instead. Which, like I showed earlier in the video, This, if I replace the pick guard, could have a humbucker, single coil humbucker, humbucker, single coil, single coil, single coil, single coil humbucker, or humbucker, blank humbucker, however you want to, do that kind of setup. So it's very versatile, and I might do that one day. I might go ahead and take this pick guard off and go ahead and put a zebra pup or something really loud and crunchy in this end of the guitar. But right now I really like this. I'm going to go the two combined. And then my favorite bridge stuff. Immediately brighter and sharper and crunchier and louder, like pretty much anything that right next to the bridge is going to be. But this guitar right now sounds extremely good. I mean, I just love it. Great sustain. It's got great sound. Really like it. And of course, it's got the pop-in whammy bar that's not going to give you any trouble because it's not threaded. And that's one of the things I learned and saw it, obviously corroborated by other guys. A lot of guys on YouTube will talk about this, is that you'll get a 60 cycle hum, one of my favorite channels. He's so fun to watch. He's just such an entertaining person. I really love it. But he talks about how he winds his threading in like whatever plumbing tape or some kind of pipe dope tape kind of stuff to keep it from buzzy rattling in there. Well, these push-pull ones, they don't ever buzz or rattle. So it's just really good and kind of newer and better. And you can tighten them up in there to decide how much sway. You can even, as you can see, that's just kind of holding its place wherever I put it to a degree. But it's not too tight. I can pop it out and put it back in. And so I like Strats, Super Strats. I also like Les Paul guitars, the bodies and designs of them. I can tolerate some of the more like axy, jaggedy looking instruments, like the Razorback or maybe the Zero style guitars a little bit. I think they're silly though. I mean, I think that they're just, eccentric and silly instruments. I think this is a functional instrument. I think LPs are extremely functional. I do own a couple of the more sillier stuff, like my Transformers guitar is a custom Razorback. I own a Dean Angel of Death II that's, based on that old Gibson design. To me, they're just too big and freaky and wonky and weird and everything. But I do not like a certain bracket of instruments, and now this is just me, and I'm not telling people what to like or what not to like, but I call them stretch taffy guitars. There are lots of guitars where if you look at the body, they look like a piece of taffy that's been kind of stretched one way or the other. And when I look at a stretch taffy guitar, I can't help but think about that looks like stretch taffy. And I don't ever like any guitars that are like that. I never buy guitars that look like that. Maybe the Prince guitar is a stretch taffy guitar. I'm sure that if I look, again, like 60 Cycle Hum, he has a ton of what I would consider to be stretch taffy guitars, and I just, so for me, and this is that unpopular opinion thing. It's really a lot how the aesthetics of the instrument are, and of course how it plays and how it feels and everything. But if someone brought me a stretch taffy guitar and it played well, I wouldn't care because I just can't look at it. It's not something I'd buy, and just to look at. So I also in the kind of in order, I like Strats #1, Super Strats #2, give a Les Paul style, LP styles, and then maybe Tellys on the end there, and then everything else goes on underneath those things. And I'm not going to really want those unless there's some weird reason for it. And so I love the Pacer, which I consider to be in the Strat, in between the Strat and Super Strat brackets. I really think the Pacer look and style is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, guitar style. A lot like what Eddie Van Halen played reminds me of the Pacer and how it looks. I just love how the Kramer Pacer guitar, which I guess Kramer's owned by Gibson now, but I love that style of instrument. I think it's a good natural evolution for the Stratocaster. So, thanks for watching if you did, and I hope you don't be afraid to work on your own guitars. And I'm going to show a couple little quick shots of this instrument, and my video will be done.